Hello and welcome to the Changing the Perception of Sales podcast, Series 3. Last year, we spoke to SDRs, BDRs, and people earlier on in their sales careers about their journeys, tips, and why people should get into the industry. This year, we'll be speaking with sales and business leaders about their journeys, how they've made their success, and their insights into sales as an industry, especially what needs to be done to change the perception of sales. I'm Lizzie.
I'm Kyle, and still for far too long, people have just been falling into sales. Through this podcast, and by having conversations with industry leaders, we're looking to continue to change the perception of sales and make it a career of choice. On today's episode, we're joined by Marco Santamaria. Would you do the unthinkable and leave a six-figure salary role in central London to travel the world? That's exactly what Marco did. Starting his sales career in Queens, New York at the age of just 16, earning $6 an hour, Marco was able to progress into a senior leadership position for global cybersecurity vendor Varonis. However, last year, Marco made the decision to leave this all behind to pursue his dream of traveling the world, and now spends his time coaching up-and-coming SDRs and entry-level sales talent. Hope you enjoy the episode.
Welcome to this episode of the Changing the Perception of Sales podcast. Today, we are joined by Marco Santamaria. Massive thank you for joining us, Marco.
Thank you, guys. I'm excited to be here.
Great. And to kick things off, just please introduce yourself.
Sure. So I am originally from New York City. Grew up in Queens, one of the 5 boroughs, where I started my sales career. And in 2016, I received a promotion to relocate to London to oversee the UK SDR team. I was there in London for 5 years, and I left just last year in June 2021 to pursue traveling full time, as well as running an SDR coaching business and a travel and food YouTube channel.
Great, thank you very much for that introduction, Marco, and we'll definitely dig a lot into that in the next few minutes. But as you know, on this series, we're really focused on people in more, I suppose, senior or leadership commercial positions and within sales. But as such, we love to start right at the beginning. So I guess thinking back to all those years ago, how and why did you get into sales?
Oh, okay. So my sales story is a little bit all over the place. There's a couple of different entry points. So I'll talk about those. But my initial sales journey started when I was 16 years old in high school. And I was tired of asking my parents for money to hang out with my friends. And all they would give me is a $5 bill. So while I was walking around in high school, I saw this flyer that was posted in the hallways, and it said appointment setters needed, 15 hours a week, and the pay was $6.50 an hour plus commission. And I thought, well, that sounds way better than working at McDonald's. So I interviewed at the company, and I started the following week. And basically, I was the guy who would call your house in the evening and interrupt your family dinner to ask you if you needed a quote on new windows or to remodel your bathroom. But soon enough, I was making $600 a month, which is basically like $1 million to a 16-year-old. But then I went to university. I studied psychology and sociology. The plan was to go into social work. When I graduated with my bachelor's, I applied to a master's in social work program. And I decided to get a part-time sales assistant job in order to pay for my master's. I later found out that my application for the master's was submitted a week late, and I had to wait 6 months until the next program started, which I was low-key kind of happy about because I was reluctant to do the program in the first place. I didn't really want to become a social worker. But the company that I was in, which I was doing the sales assistant role, I ended up getting 2 promotions within those 6 months. And with my commission, I was making $60K in my first year and never looked back.
Wow. So what a journey then. So it started off when you were 16, just wanting some more pocket money from your parents, and obviously then stemmed to build a really, really long-term career in the industry, which is interesting. How was that first initial role actually when you were 16, being an appointment setter and, as you said, calling people, interrupting their dinners potentially?
I was told I have to be on the phone and I just have to call people and tell people, what the company does. And that sounded way easier than anything else that a 16-year-old could do. I mean, when you're 16, there aren't really many opportunities anyway. So for me to be sitting down, putting a headset on and just calling people, that was the easiest $600 a month that I could have made.
Fantastic. And then obviously that stemming then into you following your long-term education, wanting to be a social worker actually. Intriguingly, like I really just wanted to dig into that a little bit. What was the initial motivation between wanting to be a social worker?
Oh man, if my parents hear this, they're going to kill me. But basically, taking on psychology and sociology at university was the only class schedule that would fit with the schedule that I wanted, meaning I didn't have to wake up before 9 a.m. and I didn't have to take any classes after 6 p.m. So it fit in the right schedule. And that's basically the reason why I took psychology and sociology.
Oh, to be fair, uni students dream that, to be honest, picking the degree because of the schedule of it. Okay, so as you mentioned, then probably wasn't the career path that you wanted to follow down. Then, so what I suppose did you really like about sales? What made you really enjoy it while you were doing it to make you want to, I suppose, continue your career in it?
Well, I mean, it really started off with the opportunity to make as much money as you wanted to. Being able to earn commission on top of your basic salary, it really opens up a lot of doors and gives you an opportunity to have a lot more freedom with things that you really want to do, whether it's on the weekends or if there's things that you want to buy. It just opens so many doors that other entry level jobs would not give you the ability to do.
Great. And in that sales assistant role then that you did, sort of in between the masters or beforehand, what were you actually selling?
So we were working, or I was working for a newsprint magazine reprint company. So what the company did was they took articles that were in the newspapers or magazines and sold the rights and permissions for the companies to be able to use that in any of their marketing communications.
Oh, nice. Okay, cool. And then obviously then, so you had quite an early entry then into the sales industry. What was your sort of first perception of sales as an industry to go into?
Well, being from New York, sales was your Wolf of Wall Street, stockbrokers, door to door sales, or used car sales. Basically, sales was the job that you took when you couldn't get a job doing anything else, quote unquote, better.
Okay, interesting. And what, I mean, how did that kind of impact your decision to go into the industry?
Well, I realized that even though it might not be the job that society was telling you was the better job to take, I was probably making more than some of the other people who were trying to grind in these so-called better jobs and them having to pay off significant amount of debt and not being able to have the opportunities to do the things that they really wanted to do. So sales was really a fantastic opportunity to give you the skills that you need to do anything else in life.
Sure. Yeah. So despite that perception, obviously you were hitting your own goals in terms of financial goals and making the money you wanted to make, but also gaining, I suppose, the skills that you could bring into, well, I suppose, any part of your life and career going forward. And obviously, you mentioned in New York that was like the big perception of sales. What was it actually like growing up and living in New York?
So New York is extremely fast paced. There's a grind about the city with people that are always on the go, always busy. You really have to have a hustler's mentality to be in New York, with this idea of doing whatever it takes to get to the top. And New York has its own culture around making it. And that's why Frank Sinatra said, if you can make it there, you can make it anywhere. And it's true about the bright lights. There's always something to do, new restaurants every week, new things to do, new parties and events. Whatever you see in TV and film is exactly what New York is like.
That's interesting because yeah, I think obviously most of us just visit New York and we hear about it. It's very like popular in films, TV, that kind of thing. But I suppose to live up to grow there, to build your career there is so different. I suppose how would you like consider the culture of it being in New York and growing up there different to the UK?
Well, I was in London. So, London being a big metropolis, just like New York, there were a lot of similarities. It's a huge city, and people are always on the go. And when you go into the actual city of London, people have their suits on. They're jumping off the tube. They're walking extremely fast to get to their offices, and there is a very similar mindset, which is why I was able to adapt to London pretty quickly, and it almost felt like home because the same mentality, the same pace. It was really nice to see.
Nice, that sounds good. But yeah, I'm always intrigued too, because London, obviously, as you mentioned, being a big city and a metropolis, people can draw so many parallels. But I can imagine like there are some differences in the culture, and especially when you step into sales. Then obviously, you worked as an SDR and in sales in the USA, and you worked in the UK. What would you say the differences are between being in sales in the UK and the US are?
Oh, I think the biggest difference that really stood out to me extremely fast is that in New York, you have to be extremely direct with your communication. And I feel like in the UK, there's a lot of dancing around the subject and not wanting to hurt people's feelings. When us as salespeople, I mean, regardless of where we are, we just want to get the answer that we need, right? So we can move forward. And I think there was a lot of having to communicate what it is that we need for ourselves as salespeople in the UK to help prospects or anybody else that we're trying to do business with, uh, guide them towards giving us a more direct answer.
Sure. And if you did at all, how did you sort of adapt your style when you moved over to the UK?
It had to be more of understanding, right? I think because I had my own perception of what sales was like from the US market, I really needed to take a step back, have more conversations with existing customers, have more conversations with our partners, have daily conversations with the team that I was managing to really understand what are their sorts of mindsets, what is it that they're hoping to accomplish in their day to day, and really adapt the conversation to each individual. So, it wasn't really a full blown change of mindset. It was really just taking a step back and understanding the environment that I was in.
Sure. Okay. Perfect. So, like, yeah, more conversations, taking that step back, really. And I suppose, obviously, now I understand you're traveling a lot at the moment, so not in one place too often. Do you miss New York at all, actually?
Well, New York is always going to be home, but it's always exciting to travel to new places, learn about new cultures, and most importantly for me, eat some new food.
Oh, definitely. What food's on the bucket list then to eat?
Ooh, well, I haven't been to Asia yet, and whenever I do go to Asia, I want to spend at least 6 months in Japan.
Oh,
Wow,
yes. No, that'd be so lovely. Okay, amazing. I know Carl will dig into that a lot. He's a foodie, so he'll talk a lot about the food that you're going to be eating across the
he
world.
is.
But then I suppose then to touch then on I suppose your journey in sales then. So obviously moving to the UK, what motivated you to I suppose get an SDR role at Varonis? Because I appreciate you were there just before you left recently.
Yeah, so with regards to getting into Varonis, prior to getting a job in tech sales, I was actually a recruiter. And I started off recruiting in the pharmaceutical space, which I knew absolutely nothing about. And it just really didn't make sense to me. And then I got moved onto the financial tech desk where I was recruiting for developers. My boss at the time, he was actually recruiting within the cybersecurity industry. And in 2013, nobody was really talking about cybersecurity. So it sounded awesome. And he was placing candidates in jobs for 130K, 150K, 175K. And I said to myself, wow, I am not going to go back to uni and study IT or security, but I know how to sell. So if companies are paying 150K for cybersecurity professionals, then they're definitely paying that amount for software. So I figured, let me find somewhere that I can sell software to these guys. And that's how I found out about this pre IPO cybersecurity company that was looking for SDRs.
Nice. And then once you started your SDR role, actually, just really intriguingly, can you remember the first meeting that you ever booked?
Oh, I'll tell you what, my first day I actually booked 3 meetings,
Wow.
but I
Wow.
got lucky because the guy that I was replacing was moving into an AE role, and he crushed it as an SDR. So he had prospects lined up for me already, and all I needed to do was just dial them up and book them in. So I got lucky.
Oh, there you go. You had someone helping you out a little bit then. What was it like though? I suppose making that first call and booking that first meeting. How did that feel?
It felt fantastic. Being a recruiter where you're working a full desk, it was a little bit weird to just book the meeting and then hand that off to the AE because you're not actually running the demo and then eventually closing the deal. But the part that I was hired to do, which was to generate interest, uncover what are the specific pains of that organization, and then be able to generate the interest to book the meeting, I was able to do it, and it felt really good. And every other meeting after that felt even better.
Nice. And I suppose we'll touch on then your progression then within the company, but just out of interest, really. I know we've talked a little bit about the differences between New York and London and how they are similar in some aspects, but different in terms of, I suppose, the SDR positions and the approach there. I suppose what was your motivation behind the move to the UK?
So, like I said earlier, Sinatra said, "If you can make it there, you can make it anywhere." And I felt like I did so much and accomplished a lot in New York City, and I wanted to get a change of scenery and make it somewhere else. Now, I always wanted to move to California, so I told my manager that if we ever open up an office in Cali, that I wanted to be a part of it. And he looked at me and he said, "Well, that's not going to happen, but would you be interested in moving to London?" And the rest is history.
Okay, no, nice. And I suppose then, like, how did you feel then when you were making the move? Because it's, I suppose, a slightly longer distance then to California, to London rather than California. Then, so how did you feel about making, I suppose, such a big move then?
I mean, it felt amazing because, not only being able to travel to a completely different city, but being able to go abroad and travel overseas to a completely new country that I barely spent any time in. It was definitely a challenge, and it was going to be a way to test my ability to adapt and learn new things, which, as salespeople, we need to do all the time.
Sure. Okay. Perfect. And then, I suppose in your progression, then you went to a team leadership role, and then you went into as to a sales manager role. Then, why management? Why was leadership and management the route that you wanted to take?
So I had to ask myself a couple of things, right? Because I think everybody wants to, or everybody has this idea of working in some sort of leadership position, but most of the time they don't get the ability to work in a leadership position because they don't have leadership experience. And the company was in hyper growth mode at the time. So people were being advanced every week. But as an SDR, I was usually top 5 of the sales floor with number of dials made and the quality of my meeting conversion. So I walked into the role with sales experience already, and I was naturally coaching the other SDRs on my team who were sitting around me. And when the opportunity came up, it made sense for me to move into more of a leadership position. I could have chosen between moving into an AE role, which potentially could have made me a lot more money. But then I realized that I would be more valuable to the company if I could help 10 people become strong AEs.
Sure. So passing on your expertise then to the people around you, and I suppose stepping into that position. And what was that transition like actually from an SDR to then a leadership position?
It was tough. I'll tell you what, it's extremely tough for uh, brand new leaders if they don't have any leadership experience. Because for me, I thought it was as simple as take my exact process and teach that same exact process to 10 people, and they follow the same steps, follow that blueprint, and you'll be able to advance just like I did. And it took me a little bit of time to realize that each individual person needs to take on their own specific process and grow in their own way. So I had to learn about each individual, how to work with each individual to get them into their own comfortable process, to get them performing well, succeeding, and then eventually on their way to their new position.
How long would you say it took you to learn those things, Marco? You said you had to learn, each person has a different way of doing things or a different process. How long did that take you to figure out?
So I would say the first quarter that I was a leader, I was a little bit stuck in my ways of, guys, follow this blueprint, just do these same exact steps, do exactly what I did, and you're going to succeed. And by the end of the quarter, I only had half of my team hitting their target, which for me would be um, it would be affecting not only my own commission, but it would be affecting what we needed to provide for the business. So I needed to really understand, what is it about my process that wasn't working? And it wasn't my blueprint, it was my process on how I was trying to work with each individual and coach each individual. So the next quarter is when we change things up. The next quarter is when I spent a lot more time doing one-on-ones rather than group training, focusing on the specific tasks that each individual was either strong at or needed improvement on. And that's how we were able to get more people hitting their target. So I would say, if a leader starts as soon as they get into the role, they can get their entire team productive and where they need to be within the first 3 months. But for me, it took a little bit more.
Yeah, interesting. And what we'll do later on, we'll come on to more the coaching side of SDRs as well, kind of linking to what it is you're doing right now. But what we want to move on to now, Marco, is Varonis. Sounds like it was going amazing. Moved over to London, managed a multinational team. By all accounts, seems like you were doing very well in the role, and then, in your own words, did the unthinkable. So rather than me explain the story, please just tell the listeners kind of what happened next.
Okay, so as an American, the typical idea of travel is to find a beach destination somewhere like Miami, Cancun, Punta Cana in the Dominican Republic, and go there every single year and stay at an all expenses paid resort, and you're just laying on the beach and sipping pina coladas. So when I moved to the UK, I started to learn what real travel was. So exploring new cities, new cultures, new food, new languages. And then when lockdown came around, there was nowhere to go. We couldn't go anywhere. We couldn't visit any new places, and cabin fever really started to hit, as well as the idea of what true happiness is. I think all of us during lockdown started to really think about what our priorities were and looking to make some changes in our life. And, I wanted to be able to spend a lot more of my time doing the things that I enjoyed with the people that I enjoyed the most. So, made a decision to just leave the corporate world and go travel. When I travel places, I usually come back home and say, man, I wish I could have stayed there longer. And I wanted the opportunity to be able to go somewhere. And if I wanted to stay there longer, then I will.
Wow. What a move to make, by the way, and what a decision to make as well. Very, very gutsy. How did you feel kind of approaching, your employer, or just how did you feel when you actually let people know that was what you were looking to do?
Well, I mean, half of me was extremely liberated, right? Because then I knew that I was chasing the dreams that I was thinking about for quite some time. And the other half of me was extremely scared because, who knows what the future holds? Who knows what, after being in the corporate world for the past 16 years, basically, how do you adapt into doing something completely different where you have to figure out what your next steps are going to be? And it was a little bit different because as an American, you have a 5-year visa. So it's not like you can really take the time to figure out how it's going to work or, what are the necessary steps. It kind of just came in the middle of lockdown. We were still in lockdown when I made the decision, and having to leave pretty much straight away and just get started. It was quite the challenge, but No regrets here.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, how's it going so far?
It's been amazing. Since leaving, been to 35 cities in 12 countries, and that's the past 14 months at this point. So it's been humbling. It's been quite the experience and learning about so many different things.
What has been the best city and the best meal that you've had?
Ooh, okay. So um, I would say the best city would be Lisbon. There's just such an awesome vibe in Lisbon. There's a lot of remote workers as well because they have the digital nomad visa, so that you can go there and you can stay there for an extended period of time. So there's a lot of people from all parts of the world that are congregated in Lisbon. And when you go to a place where beers are €1 for a pint, I mean, you can't really go wrong.
You can't. Superboc is great as well. Superboc and Sagres are great. But Lizzie, well, we're off as a business
Yeah.
to Lisbon a week on Friday. So I think this recording will be released when we get back. But what's been the best meal that you've had, or the best place you would recommend in Lisbon, Marco?
Okay, so there is a restaurant that is in Alfama, which is the old city. They don't have too many hotels over there. It's in the hills. It's a little bit difficult to walk to, but there is a restaurant called Lisboa U It is extremely authentic. There's only about maybe 4 tables inside there, so you'll have to queue up if you want to get a table. But the food is made by local family, and it is amazing. I think the flaming chorizo is probably my favorite meal that I had there.
Sounds incredible. We'll have to check it out.
Yeah.
And what would you say is the worst place you've been to?
Hmm, that's tough to say. So Costa Rica was really really nice, but I think it probably it reached its prime already because it was pretty much undiscovered and untapped maybe 10 years ago. But now they accept the US dollar. There's just a bunch of expats that have built beautiful houses there. So you get or you lose the authentic culture of what Costa Rica is supposed to be. So it was beautiful, definitely nice beaches over there, but not sure if it was my favorite place to go.
Well, it can't be too bad if Costa Rica's down there at the bottom anyway, can it? It certainly can't have been a too bad year plus. And on the travels so far and kind of, I guess, doing something completely different, what would you say have been the main things that you've learned about yourself?
So, I mean, there are so many amazing cultures out there in the world. Uh, your own self development and self learning really is something that can be achieved. And being able to sit down with locals from any city, anywhere in the world, and learning about their own life and learning about how they grew up and things that make them happy, I think that's taught me a new sense of what are the things that I should strive for in my life. Um, growing up in New York and spending a lot of time in London and being in sales, where where money is your biggest motivator, you have a lot of personal motivations, and those personal motivations have definitely changed in the last year after having so many conversations with some extremely humble, down to earth people.
And how have those kind of personal motivations changed? And the reason I ask, I saw a LinkedIn post you did where I think you went into detail around maybe the more materialistic things that you used to be motivated by versus what they are now. And just linking back to what you said earlier about true happiness. So how have those motivations changed for you?
Yeah, absolutely. So it used to be about the glitz and the glamour, designer clothes, nice car, nice gadgets. And I really started to realize how I don't want to say wasteful, but how unnecessary those things are. And my motivations slowly were turning into time freedom, the ability to travel to more destinations, the ability to learn about new things and new cultures, and being able to invest into other vehicles that will generate more money so that I can stop trading my time for money.
Yeah. And to come back to, I guess, people in sales now or looking to get into sales, this is a bit of an age-old debate about the need or the importance to have to be money motivated to work in sales. Now you've kind of had two completely polar opposite experiences, really. Do you think you have to be money motivated to be successful in sales?
I think there is an aspect of money motivation in sales because you're required to hit specific targets that will pay you a commission. And if you're not motivated by that commission, you won't be successful in your role. So, the motivation to make money, I think that's what's really changed. The reason of what I'm going to do with that money. So, while sales is going to earn you that money, you don't need to spend it on jewelry or designer things or materialistic things, but use that to um, invest into other things that will be able to provide you with the kind of life that you want in the future. So um, I wouldn't say you can be successful in sales without being money motivated, but you shouldn't be motivated by materialistic things or possessions.
Yeah, interesting point because Costa Rica, Lisbon, flights and accommodation at these places still certainly isn't going to be cheap as well, depending on how luxurious you want to go. So I think your point there that there's still an element of having to be money motivated, but maybe the things that you want the money for, maybe just really consider and think about what they are before you actually get into the industry. And it's really interesting how yours have changed. Um, Coming back onto the journey, it sounds amazing. Lisbon, grilled chorizo, €1 beers. It sounds incredible. As with anything, though, I'm sure there's been a few challenges or things that you just didn't realize were going to be the case. So, what have been some of the maybe the less glamorous parts of being away for a year, over a year?
Well, you're going to be in uncomfortable situations. You're going to be tested. You're going to be challenged. Whether it's a new language, whether it is a new culture that you have to get used to, especially if you're going to be especially if you're going to be staying there for an extended period of time, you really need to understand what is life like in these different countries. So right now, I'm actually in a little town called Olvera, which is about an hour north of Malaga. And here in Spain, siesta rules, right? So you cannot find anything to eat between the hours of 2 p.m. and 6 p.m. anywhere in Spain. So as a foodie, one of the challenges is being out there in the afternoon after doing whatever it is that you're doing and being able to find a good meal. So I'm keeping the challenges light today.
That's absolutely a light challenge. I'm sure there's been some bigger challenges, but that's between 2 and 6. People get hungry mid-afternoon. But
Absolutely.
no, cool. And kind of we'll move on from the traveling in a second, but I'm just, again, particularly interested. There may be people listening to this that are maybe thinking about doing something similar, or maybe thought about it in the past and just scared of they have commitments or how am I going to earn money? What advice would you give to anyone that's maybe thinking about doing something like this?
So you can find a job where remote work is possible. Okay, so um, a lot of companies since the pandemic have been moving to either a hybrid model or a fully remote model. And if you do your research, there are plenty of companies that you can do that with. And being able to have that job and find a country where they offer a nomad visa, or if you want to travel every 2 months or 3 months, you can do that as well. Um, or you can start creating something on the side based on your skills as early as possible if you're working in an office based job. So there are so many things that you can learn and do online to make money. And once you learn how to do it, you can do it anywhere. So, as an example, if you live in London, you probably pay rent anywhere from £800 on the low side to around £1,600, or sometimes even up to 2 grand a month. And there are beautiful places around the world that you can live off of 500 pounds, and that's going to cover your rent, your food for the month, and your entertainment. So, a lot of the fear is, how am I going to be able to make enough to afford it, when really all you need to do is find some places where it's not going to take that much.
And as we sit and speak right now, the value of the pound is deteriorating big time. You may not be able to afford anything with the pound soon. But anyway, moving on from that, another thing to get your thoughts on, Marco, you just mentioned then about remote work. A bit of an age-old debate again, particularly with the new way of working, is can SDRs or entry-level salespeople, should they be in the office full-time, in your opinion, based on your experiences?
In my opinion, you do not need to be in the office to be a successful SDR. You need to have a really good manager that is willing to step up, to coach you, to teach you along the way, and to have trust in you to be able to do your job. Now, one of the biggest challenges, especially with being an SDR and doing the cold calling, is having the environment, right? You want to be in an environment where there are other people who are going through the same exact thing that you're going. Sometimes you want to hear what they're saying on the phone. And there's actually a lot of companies out there that allow you to join a virtual cold calling room where the rest of your team is there with you. You can make small talk. You can actually listen into their conversations. You can hear what they're pitching, and they can listen to you and be able to bounce ideas off of each other. So that idea of it is necessary to be in the office because of the environment, because you need to be in front of your manager, I think those days are long gone, and companies should make the investment to look forward to give their SDRs the opportunity to work from wherever they are and be successful.
Interesting. And moving on now, we're kind of transitioning the conversation into traveling into what it is you're doing now whilst on your travels, which is coaching SDRs. So you mentioned about making money whilst traveling. Again, just tell the listeners, guess what it is you do now and how it is you're making a living whilst being all over the world.
Yeah, so I'm going to talk about first how I got into this, and how I was able to build it to what it is today. So when I was in London, I was conducting an average of 1 to 2 interviews every single day throughout the entire year. So naturally, I had to be very selective with who I was bringing into the business. And a lot of the people who I actually did reject for the role ended up contacting me later on saying, I've never had an interview where I've had to think like that before. And I'm curious to learn more from you, learn about how you think, and be able to receive coaching from you. So my initial students started off while I was still in the UK, and it was sort of a side thing that I was doing with people who wanted to learn a little bit more from me. And when I left London, I kept on these students, and eventually started getting a lot more active on LinkedIn, sharing my own ideas, sharing some of the things that I was learning and some of the things that I was teaching to my students, that more and more people started to approach me about coaching them. So right now it's turned into a full-blown SDR coaching business where I coach SDRs into how to land their first role and how to be successful as they continue to develop in their SDR career.
Interesting. And there's kind of one thing that I really want to touch on that you mentioned there. I think it's the importance of providing a great experience at interviews. And that means it can still be a challenging interview, but there'll be a lot of businesses that maybe this slips quite far down on the list of priorities. But the fact that people were messaging you after being rejected for a role, if we're being completely honest, I think goes to show about the experience that they had going through the interview process. And I think that's something that a lot of businesses can learn from. But coming on to the interviews themselves, then, you said that people wanted to learn more about the way you interviewed people. What did you look for? Or what do you look for when interviewing SDRs or salespeople in general?
Sure. I think the main thing, first and foremost, that hiring managers are looking for is somebody who can be coached. Now, being an SDR is an entry level position. However, it requires so many skills that you need to master. Now, You don't need to be an expert in any of those areas, but you need to understand the logic behind the basics and the ability to learn and apply feedback. Also, as important is the ability to create a process for your work and to take initiative when things aren't playing out the way that you want them to. So, interview questions are going to be around how you're going to be able to do that and to show where you've been able to do that in the past. But I think for the more modern SDR, one of the trends that I'm seeing is that in the future, I truly believe that companies will start looking for people that have a strong LinkedIn social media presence.
That kind of brings us on to what you've been really advocating recently, Marco, and interested to understand the change in your LinkedIn profile. So again, I'm sure you won't mind me saying, but when at Varonis, LinkedIn was probably, sharing company posts. It was the odd post here and there. Now, and I mean this very respectfully, you're all over our LinkedIn feeds with tips, wisdom, commenting, sharing everything. So what's been the big kind of change in your behavior when it comes to LinkedIn specifically?
There's been a huge evolution in LinkedIn where it used to be a huge database of just creating your online CV. And basically, that's only going to be updated when you're looking for a new job or you found a new job. And when you're working at a job, just like you said, maybe sharing company information, company blog posts, or press releases, to now being able to build your personal brand. Your company doesn't own your LinkedIn. You own your LinkedIn, and sharing the company information, yes, it can make you successful in being able to achieve the specific sales goals and sales targets that you have. But your LinkedIn profile is one of the only things that you can carry from one company to another. So taking the time out to build your personal and unique brand is what's going to be able to sustain you as a salesperson as you move along through whether it's different companies or different roles. And a lot of people who I speak to, they're scared about posting on LinkedIn because they don't feel like they have anything to share. They feel like they don't have any wisdom to share. And I always tell them, don't worry about creating content based on what you know. Start creating content based on your experience. Document your experience, and people will naturally follow you.
Really good advice. You're absolutely right. The big thing that people always say when, posting on LinkedIn, "Oh, I don't know what to post," or "Why would anyone want to listen to me? I don't have time to post," is what a lot of people say. And we just say, well, it's going to probably make you better at your job and generate you more leads. So if it was anything else, you'd be making the time to do it. But just on LinkedIn, your profile obviously skyrocketed in the last few months since the increase in activity. What steps have you personally taken to ensure that you're building and creating a good personal brand for yourself?
So obviously, LinkedIn optimization is going to be the first thing that you would need to do, making sure that when somebody lands on your page, that your photo is clear, your banner is clear with who you are and what it is that you're trying to accomplish, and your tagline of what you're on LinkedIn for. Those have to be clear. Your goal is when somebody visits your LinkedIn profile, that they want to stay on your profile for a little bit longer and scroll down to the the meat and potatoes, the good stuff, right? Where you actually get to highlight some of your own accomplishments. From there, then the next thing that you want to do is connect with as many people as possible that you want to swap stories with, right? Don't connect with people who are only going to be beneficial for you. Connect with people who you can share stories with, people who were in your seat maybe 3 to 5 years ago, peers who are in your exact position, and then people who are in a position that you may want to get to in a couple of years. And as you connect with them, engage with their content, engage with what it is that they're posting. If they post something that is you think it's educational and it will help you, go and try it out and then come back to their post and tell them, hey, I've implemented this and this is what I was able to experience. If you feel like somebody is not clear on their post, ask them to clarify, ask them to give you a little bit more detail into what it is that they're trying to communicate. Or if somebody mentions something that is helping you out, thank them for it and explain what it's been able to do for you. And this is so one of the things that I've been saying recently is that every single time that somebody on LinkedIn hits publish, all of a sudden it turns into a networking event. And LinkedIn is the best way to get in front of the people that you want to eventually have conversations with. The doors are open. It's up to you to start shaking hands and meeting people.
Great analogy there, I think, to say, yeah, it's a networking event every single time you press publish, a really good way to think about it. And I think one thing I like there as well was particularly salespeople, we're probably the worst for it. Recruiters as well, the worst for it on LinkedIn, whereas we just use it to pitch, send the connection request, pitch, pitch, pitch. But actually, if you view LinkedIn as a platform where, yeah, build connections that are, are going to help you with your job, but also as a platform for you to learn and for you to develop and for you to take things over people, I think that's a really good way to look at it as well. But yeah, it is interesting. People just pitch too much, or you get a connection request, and then within a second in your inbox, this is what I do. That's great. But just lastly, before we kind of come to the end, last quick fire questions. You coach a lot of SDRs, obviously worked with a lot of SDRs and entry level salespeople in your time as a manager as well. Where do most salespeople go wrong?
I think they go wrong when they give up too quickly. Sales has this. It comes with the reputation of being able to make a lot of money, and if you're not seeing the results within the first 3 months or 6 months, then young sales professionals feel like they're not good enough to do it, and they don't want to continue failing. However, if you continue to fail and tweak whatever it is that your process is, eventually you're going to see the results. And as long as you stay consistent, keep making the necessary changes that you either observe or that your manager observes, you'll be able to see success later on down the road. And if you have the idea that you will make six figures after 2 years or 3 years, if you keep doing it, you'll get there.
Fantastic. No, really good advice there. And I suppose what we'll do now, then, drawing to a close, I suppose, on the conversation, is a couple more quick fire questions, and linking actually from that final point that you made there about, where salespeople are going wrong. I suppose the first quick fire question I thought would be good to ask was, what is the best piece of advice that you've received in your career?
Ooh, I'm going to switch it up actually, and I'm going to tell you the worst advice I ever received. Okay. So when I was younger and in that first sales role, I was looking to move out of my parents' place and into my own apartment. And I was given the advice to find a place that was nicer than I imagined and slightly more expensive than I can afford now, as a way to motivate me to make more money and look into the future. You want to have a nice place in the future, so get that place now and work towards it. And then the financial crisis came along, and a few months later, I was laid off and stuck with rent I couldn't afford. So, I guess good advice as a as to piggyback off of that is to really live within your means. I would recommend living off of your basic and using your commission to invest or to save for a rainy day.
Great. No, good advice there. And yeah, probably not the best position to be in then after that. I suppose on that note then, what did you actually buy with your first commission check, if you can remember?
Um, I paid off student loans. That's what I did.
Sensible. Very, very sensible choice. Nice. And I suppose then, in the theme of what we're trying to do here on this podcast, in about changing the perception of sales, from your perspective, what needs to be done to change the perception of sales and make it a career of choice?
So you need to understand that sales gives you two opportunities. The first is an extremely fruitful career where you can advance quickly and make a whole lot of money. With hard work, sales is the fastest path to making six figures. Second, sales sets you up with extremely amazing skills that you'll need if you want to become, let's say, for example, an entrepreneur, skills such as presenting, cold calling, negotiation. Overall, you become a better communicator and can transfer those skills to other top roles.
Great, nice. And then one question that we put a post on LinkedIn asking any listeners or anyone interested to send us questions that they'd like to ask people within sales. So this one comes from Josh Harrington, who's the head of sales at SimpleStream. And he asked, a sale is just the end result of a successful process. What are the key KPIs you like to track in terms of activity?
Ooh, okay. So the KPIs are going to be around the types of communication that you use, right? So sales is no longer just making cold calls. Obviously, you have to balance your time between cold calls, emails, and now, like I said earlier, using LinkedIn or other social media as a channel. So, um, monitoring how many of those initial outreaches turn into a conversation. So, worry less about how many dials you're making and focus more on how many of those dials actually turn into a future conversation. And if you stick to that KPI, you're going to unlock a whole lot of opportunities.
Fantastic. And then the final one is what is one book or podcast that you would recommend for everyone to check out?
Ooh, okay. I think my book recommendation would be a little bit too cliche, but it's Atomic Habits by James Clear. Obviously, a great book. It shows you that you can accomplish huge changes in your life by adopting tiny incremental habits and stacking them on top of each other. But for me, podcast that I listen to every single day is the Gary Vee audio experience. He does a fantastic job of showing you that whatever age you're at, it's still early and it's never too late to chase the things that make you truly happy.
Fantastic. Some good recommendations there. Marco, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you guys for having me.
Thank you, Marco.
Thank you so much for listening to the Changing the Perception of Sales podcast. Please subscribe and follow for more. If you like this content, also please check out This is Prime on all our social media channels and also Kyle Gallagher and Lizzie Formisano on LinkedIn. See you next time.